We're joined now by Peter Anderson from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Anderson, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
What's your take on Wayne Swan's sixth budget?
Well, it's not a budget that is traditional in the pre-election style, but it is unfortunately a budget that's not going to lift business confidence, nor really improve our competitive position as an economy, because the government doesn't have a lot of money to play with. And we already know from the budget last night that we've got a $19 billion deficit. Certainly there's no joy for struggling small business people, and that's probably my greatest disappointment of the budget, because they have again been ignored. There's 2 million small business people employing 7 million people in Australia, and in circumstances where the government's forecasting a weaker economy next year, another 50,000 unemployed people next year, you really needed a budget that was going to give some confidence to small businesses, and that's not there.
But at the same time, the government is doing everything the business community has been pressing it to do. It's cracking down on so-called middle-class welfare. It is getting the budget, sure it's in deficit now, but budget back on surplus over the course of the forward estimates. Surely they deserve a tick for being fiscally responsible in that regard.
Well, look, I wish the budget did do what the business community's been calling for. There's a couple of measures in this budget, like the baby bonus, which should get some support from the business community, indeed the broader community. And even though the baby bonus is not going completely, because a portion of it, indeed quite a large portion, is being moved into the family tax payment, the government has done the right thing by recognising we now have parental leave schemes in Australia, and they've superseded the baby bonus, and we don't need to actually have that scheme in place. But apart from a couple of those measures, and investment in some roads and rail is also a good measure, the budget doesn't do what the business community was looking for. The pathway back to a surplus is very fragile. It's a wafer-thin surplus in 3 years' time, and even that's questionable, because there are both forecasts and assumptions about Australia's trade position, Australia's growth rates, which, given recent forecasts, are going to be questioned.
So you don't believe the budget forecasts stand up?
Well, I think we don't even need to say that those forecasts are going to be wrong to be concerned, because 19 billion this year, 18 billion the following year, 10 billion the following year, that's 8 successive years of deficits in Australia, when we've just experienced the second mining boom in a decade. So that's not a good position for the country's finances. We haven't been able to fund our necessary disability services in our regular budget. We've had to take the extraordinary action of imposing another tax on taxpayers through the Medicare levy to do something that ought to have been done in the regular budget. So I'm concerned that we haven't repaired national finances in recent years. Last night's budget tries to do some of the work that should have been done years back, and as a result it hasn't got the money to support the economy and small business.
Okay, now the attention turns later in the week to Tony Abbott, care of his budget reply speech. What would you like to see from Tony Abbott, given, as the polls say, he is on track to becoming Australia's next Prime Minister? Should he, at the very least, bank all these savings announced by Wayne Swan last night?
I think he should recognise that if he does become Prime Minister after September's election, he's going to be confronted with the same budget reality that the government was confronted with last night. A country that's not paying its way, that needs to strengthen its economy beyond the mining boom, and which needs to make some significant savings from Commonwealth expenditure to invest in the necessary social and economic infrastructure of the future. That's the challenge for him. He should certainly not just dismiss the savings measures that are proposed last night by the government, and the baby bonus should be the top of that list. He should decide that the baby bonus should go, because he's got a parental leave scheme. Even that's more generous than it needs to be. But he also shouldn't just accept Wayne Swan's proposition that savings equal tax rises. You know, one of the really disturbing aspects of the last few budgets, including last night's, is that the government describes tax rises as savings. And that is a misnomer we need to get out of our political lexicon. A tax rise is an impost on the economy or those paying it. It's not a saving. A saving is government going in and looking at trying to find savings from what government spends on itself and on duplicate services, on waste and the like.
Mr. Anderson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael.